Let us pray. O God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We ask your blessing upon our nation. Bless the work of the members of this house. May they work diligently to bring about solutions to the pressing issues of these times. Bless all men and women across our country, especially those who work in the service of others. Today we offer special thanks for the police, teachers, medical professionals, and members of our civil service. May all that is done this day be for your great honor and glory. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Okay. This sitting is now in session. Minutes for the meetings held on Tuesday, the 15th of July, 2025, and Tuesday, the 29th of July, 2025, to be confirmed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the withdrawal. I beg that these minutes be deferred.
Second that, sir.
Confirmed.
What? Okay. Minutes not confirmed. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg that these minutes be taken as read and confirmed.
Hello. The question is that these said minutes be confirmed. All those in favor say aye. All against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. These minutes are not confirmed.
Messages from Her Excellency the President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notice of motion for adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Government business is the order of the day.
I beg to move this.
I beg that the said standing orders be deferred for the remainder of the day. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Government business.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the withdrawal of the Integrated Coastal and Marine Management Bill 2025.
I beg for the withdrawal of the Integrated Coastal and Marine Management Bill to be withdrawn. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think that the ayes have it.
Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport, to move the second reading of the Tourism Accommodation Bill 2025.
Honourable
Mr.
member.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will like to seek your leave in respect of the matters before us, which has to do with one, the Tourist Accommodation Bill and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority Repeal Bill, and to ask for your due consideration that the debate be that we do a cognate debate, sir.
Permission granted.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, having granted permission for this debate, for us to do a cognate debate, I believe it is important that we, first of all, accept that across our nation, that tourism, and certainly the tourism industry, is the virtual bedrock upon which our economy rests, and therefore an area in which economic activity and the social hopes of our people rests. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me assure you and the entire country that the government remains on the front line as it relates to growing and developing the tourism sector. And we do so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because we strive for excellence. And in striving for excellence, we have to ensure that those who we inspire daily continue to give us the required standards that are necessary to advance the sector. And service, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and also standards must go hand in hand. And therefore, it is necessary that rather sometimes persons are complaining about the Barbados' heavy dependence on the tourism sector. I think the time has come for us to acknowledge and appreciate the attractiveness of tourism as a leading sector within the Barbados economy, one that dates back to many, many years, and one that has now become an attractive destination. We know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that literature is across Barbados is filled with a lot of glowing accounts about tourism and why people come to Barbados. They come to rest, they come to enjoy our beaches, they come to go into the sea, they come for the entertainment, and they come because of the friendly interactions with our citizens. And over time, this has made us proud, and over time, it has given us an opportunity to advance our tourism sector. As a matter of fact, you recall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that one of the future first president of the United States of America, George Washington, would have accompanied his ailing brother when he came to Barbados in about 1751. And he came here, obviously, for recuperation from a very serious illness. So when you look at the historical context of Barbados and the growth of the tourism sector in Barbados, you can go all the way back to 1751 with an American president who came to Barbados. So it is absolutely necessary, sir, that we look at Barbados, look at its offerings, and look at what we have as a destination to offer people. Barbados, because of its geographical location, has always been considered as a hub for economic activity. And if you look and see, for example, for the Eastern Caribbean, because of our eastern location, you will see that in respect of airlift, Barbados became and continues to be a hub. As it relates to exports as well, it is a hub. So you can see from the early days that tourism has always been an organized activity, one that was first of all centered around the private sector. But it will be remiss of me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if it didn't take the country back, and this is not a historical lesson, but it is always good to give context. But Mr. Speaker, under the political management of the Barbados Labour Party's own Grantley Adams, then Sir Grantley Adams, and now the right excellent Sir Grantley Adams, that Barbados tourism sector was formalized. It was in the early 1950s that Sir Grantley Herbert Adams moved away from what was then called the Barbados Publicity Committee and formalized arrangements for a Barbados Tourist Board. And he had the vision then to ensure that we advance as an organized sector. And it is through that organization that Barbados continues to build not only its name, brand, and reputation, but it continues to ensure growth to this destination. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that after the early 1950s with the establishment of the Barbados Tourist Board, that both governments, the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party, have played significant roles in the ongoing growth and development of our tourism sector. It is true, Mr. Speaker, that in 2018, this Barbados Labour Party had to ensure that we were very strategic to turn around the fortunes and to grow the tourism sector after some areas where we went into a deficit and we lost a lot of airlift. And I have spoken to this issue before in the Honourable Chamber, and I've set out the facts with respect to the airlift that we lost under the Democratic Labour Party and the airlift that we've introduced with when we formed the government post-2018. And that is a matter, Mr. Speaker, for record. But there are some people who also believe that there's some inbuilt fragile nature of tourism as an economic sector. And some people would have you believe that this is bad for Barbados. But let me make the point, Mr. Speaker, that we should make no apology whatsoever for our dependence on the tourism sector. And I will go in some detail during this debate to demonstrate that myth that our reliance on tourism should never be engaged. Because, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the tourism sector in Barbados, when you grow tourism, when you develop tourism, you have more employment in the country earns more foreign exchange, there's more economic activity in the country. And truth be told, Mr. Speaker, few people in Barbados would ever argue that tourism and tourism's growth has not contributed to the significant development of Barbados. It is true, sir, that the sugarcane industry also played its part back then. But the reality is that we have a strong brand, we have a strong product, and therefore the fact that we're able to attract as many visitors to Barbados, to increase spend year on year since 2018, of course, tells the story that we have not only a good product, but that we are on the right course. And therefore, persons who will wish to argue about the fragility of the tourism sector, I will say to them, look at its earnings, look at its performance. And I'm also going to make the point, Mr. Speaker, that as part of our mandate within the Ministry of Tourism, we have to seek to continually adjust the policy positions. We have to innovate, Mr. Speaker. We have to modernize, and Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we have to ensure that we do all we can do to improve the tourism sector. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I made the point earlier that we should not apologize for our success in tourism and for our growth path in tourism. Mr. Speaker, if we were to shy away from the success that we have accomplished in our country for the tourism sector, it would tell us that something is wrong with those who we put in positions to lead. And therefore, We cannot for 1 second underestimate the tremendous benefits that this sector continues to enjoy. Mr. Speaker, Barbados has crafted its own brand Barbados. But we've done so because we continually focus on the key points and the core attributes that are necessary to ensure that we build the Barbados brand. And therefore, this very peculiar Barbados brand has not only served us well in the European market, but has served us well across all markets. And we are grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the fact that at this point in our development, we are growing the tourism sector and we are focusing on what is necessary. And Mr. Speaker, we have a mandate to jealously and zealously guard the tourism sector and to protect brand Barbados. It is an invaluable asset, natural asset, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Deputy Speaker, and therefore we have to do everything necessary to ensure that we protect our brand. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore necessary, and against this background, that the Tourist Accommodation Bill has been introduced. We are uniquely aware that across the globe, there are standards that must be met, standards that must be adjusted, policies that must be revised in order, and laws that are necessary to regulate the tourism sector. And this morning, as I review the bill, the Tourist Accommodation Bill, I think it is absolutely necessary that we look, first of all, at the objects and reasons. The bill, as it states, would provide for the licensing, classification, designation, and registration of tourist accommodation, the establishment of minimum standards for tourist accommodation, and the inspection and monitoring of tourist accommodation to ensure compliance with the minimum standards. Now, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, forgive me, sir, the bill is divided into 6 parts. And each part, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the hard work that the officers and those involved with the bill would have put in terms of creating a bill that reflects not only the regulatory framework, but reflects the true spirit of growth and development within the tourism sector. The bill, and I'll start with the section at part 2, where it speaks to the right to license to operate a tourist accommodation. Mr. Speaker, there's no secret in Barbados that only hotels, apartments, and guest houses are registered, inspected, and licensed for tourist accommodation in Barbados. But we have to accept that the sector over time has become even more diverse. You have a number of online platforms offering accommodation. You would have heard the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, when we were in this chamber, I believe it was July the 25th, when the Honourable Member introduced the Tourism Levy Bill and spoke to the plethora of online agencies that are now registering and selling tourist accommodation. But we have moved from the traditional hotel, guest house, and apartment to now what people refer to as Airbnb, Vrbo, homestay, HomeAway, mybookings.com, you list them. And we are now faced with the reality that if persons are going to be offering vacation rental accommodation, that is absolutely necessary that they license. So this section makes it an offense to operate, advertise short-term rental accommodation without being registered, inspected, and licensed. And Mr. Speaker, when we look at it, Clause 4.3 of the bill, it makes it clear that if a person contravenes this process, that the person is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction, on summary conviction, to a fine of $250,000. Well, Mr. Speaker, I am not a lawyer, but let me also make this point with respect to the fines, because some people may leave this building and believe that a $250,000 fine is the only fine that will be imposed. But for the benefit of those who perhaps may remain within the doubt, let me make it clear that Section 22.6 of the Interpretation Act, Cap 1, makes provision for the fine, the penalty, and the term of imprisonment to be expressed at its maximum. So when you see a fine of $250,000 written into legislation, it simply means that that is the maximum, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And perhaps you may ask, Mr. Deputy Speaker, why I have stressed the point. Because oftentimes there are those who would like to create mischief and to give the impression now that we're imposing a $250,000 fine on people. Mr. Speaker, I go back to Section 22.6 of the Interpretation Act, Chapter 1, to make the point. So this means, as expressly stated within the legislation, that even though the fine is a maximum $250,000 to be imposed for the contravention of the section, it therefore means that a judge can impose no time, he can impose no fine, or he can impose a fine from 0 to $250,000. However, a judge cannot impose a fine beyond the maximum $250,000. So I spent a few minutes on that point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to ensure that those who may be up to legal mischief understand the Interpretation Act, but also understand what is settled when we make the point that the fine is $250,000. But Mr. Speaker, even though one may want to argue that a fine is significant, we also have to ensure and remind the country as a whole that due to Barbados's credible tourism performance and the fact that the Barbados brand remains so strong globally, we have to ensure that we protect the Barbados brand. And therefore, we must never allow violations of health and safety, violations of such a nature that could cause Barbados's tourism product to be compromised. And that is what we are seeking to do here. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as it relates to the application for a license, the bill makes it clear that an owner or operator of tourist accommodation or prospective owner or operator or the agent of such a person may, in the approved form, upon payment of the prescribed fee, apply to the Minister for a tourist accommodation license. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, what have we done? The division, known now as the Product Quality Division, which will be rebranded and will be known as the Licensing and Compliance Unit. They have, over the course certainly of the time I've been minister, making some significant developments with respect to the application process. Mr. Deputy Speaker, perhaps the country doesn't know this, but those who are involved in the hospitality business would appreciate this, that there is now a portal that those who are applying for a license to operate can do so online, submit their forms as attachment, upload the required forms and other necessary documents in order to fast track the licensing process. So no longer does one have to visit the office of the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport to apply for a license unless they want to do so. They have made provision for an online application process. And I'm happy and pleased to report that it's working, and it's working well. And there are a number of other improvements that we are going to be making to the management information system at the ministry to ensure that we even improve the efficiency of doing business within the ministry. We reminded Mr. Deputy Speaker of the Prime Minister's charge that we have to deconstruct and reconstruct. And thanks to the officers within the ministry, they have now ensured that they deconstruct and reconstructed their process that now creates even more efficiency in Barbados. So the applicant will now have to submit as usual, the health services permit or license, a certificate granted by the Barbados Fire Service, as they have had to do, a copy of obviously public liability insurance certificate, the number of rooms that are offered as a tourist accommodation, and of course a multi-hazard plan for the accommodation. And Mr. Speaker, you know we are in sometimes, especially during the hurricane season, face sometimes with maybe, and I don't want to call it into being, but some weather conditions that could affect us. And beyond weather conditions, there are other hazards as well. So what we have done within this bill is to ensure that we put the onus on the owners and operators of tourist accommodation to ensure that they have a multi-hazard plan, and we have detailed it within the bill. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the whole issue as it relates to the determination and application and issuance of a license is dealt with at Clause 6. It advises that an application of a license will be approved or refused by the minister, of which the applicant will be notified in writing. And that is determined, Mr. Speaker, and noticeary at Section 6. It also speaks within Part 2, where it makes provision for the form and the form and the direction and suspension of the license and or revocation as well, to be applied and or to be utilized in the event that a property is sold. It says at 7 that the license, Clause 7 of the bill, that the license is valid from 2 years of the issue date. Mr. Speaker, what does that mean? Currently, we have a regime that makes provision for a license to be had every year, which means that every year you had to submit the documentation. You had to ensure that the officers go in the field and do all the necessary inspections. But what we've done as a progressive ministry and as a progressive government is to move away from a 1-year license to have a 2-year license. And we are not moving to a regime where it stipulates that all licenses must be completed and or had, for example, in the month of January. We're not doing that. We're now moving to a situation where on the anniversary date, you can have your license rather than having a rush of manpower and resources going online and or going to a ministry in order to complete the registration process. And I know that the president of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, I believe it was last Friday at Haman's, when he made the point that he would wish that we would move to a multi-year license. But Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure when he saw a draft of the bill, when it was sent to the BHA, that he saw that, but was attempting to tease me as minister, or that he was trying to get some brownie points and move ahead of me
But I want to assure him, all members of his association and others, that the bill, from the time we conceptualize it right through until where we are today, that we had made a provision for the license for 2 years. Now, the issue, we will obviously, and we have built in the act, the grandfather clause. So it doesn't mean that when this bill is proclaimed, that everybody has to rush into the ministry or go online and apply. There is the arrangement as it relates to the grandfather clause that will allow those persons to operate until the expiry date of the license, and then obviously put the necessary application and all the associated information together to apply for the license. Mr. Speaker, there is no denying whatsoever that a well-established classification system can enhance international appeal and showcase Barbados's offerings in a very structured and in a very transparent way. And Mr. Speaker, all we are seeking to do here is to ensure that those who offer tourist accommodation, that they have a classification. Because when you have a classification, what are you doing? You are telling a prospective customer that you have a product on offer. This is the rating of the hotel. Some people use stars, some people use diamonds, some people tell you it's on the beach, some tell you it's a convention hotel. I'm not going to go into all of that, Mr. Speaker, because I left the tourism industry in about 4 years, and perhaps I'm likely to forget. But there are a range of classifications that can be used. But this bill sets out for and requires that if you have a tourist accommodation, that there's a designated classification. That classification, like I said, Mr. Speaker, will help those who are interested in staying or visiting the country to understand the classification of the property, to see if it fits within their budget, and to ensure that it is the required standard of accommodation that they would like to have. And that is noted in Part 3, Section 8 of the bill. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the bill then speaks to a number of other requirements that are necessary for us to ensure that we have accommodation to a specific standard, and that we are now moving in the direction that is absolutely necessary for us to ensure that we have a not only marketed property and tourist accommodation, but we have well-defined standards. Mr. Speaker, Part 4 of the bill speaks to the duties of our operator. And we're going to spend some time in respect of the duties of the operator, because it's absolutely necessary that we understand why we must have the standards, but also why there must be defined duties of the operator. It states that at Clause 9, it specifies that an operator shall display the name of the tourist accommodation bill and license. At Clause 10, it stipulates that there must be trained personnel and staff to maintain the prescribed standards of service. It speaks to the fact that you must have staff in attendance during operating hours of the accommodation. Clause 11 makes provision for a list of charges and an invoice to be provided to tourists. Now, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, this is absolutely necessary, because if you're staying in any accommodation, it is paramount that you have a detailed invoice of the charges. When we travel, Mr. Speaker, and we go into a hotel, you see a list, not only room charge, you see if there is a convention charge, you see state tax, you see city tax, and if you are in an environment where there's probably some environmental concern, you also see an environmental tax. Now, we are not advocating that. But the reality, and I sought to make that comment because it is absolutely necessary that when you check into a facility, you should have an itemized statement of what you have to pay. And therefore, the detailed invoice will allow the customer to see the duration of stay, the charge, and any other taxes and or discounts that are applicable. And that is provided for at section clause 11 of the bill. Now, it also makes the point that if an operator does not provide the guests with an itemized bill, then there's a provision in here for a penalty not exceeding $5,000. Mr. Deputy Speaker, clause 12 speaks to reservation and check-in, but makes provision for guests at the time of reservation and check-in to be provided with comprehensive information regarding the services and facilities at the tourist accommodation. I don't think I need to go in and explain why that is necessary. I believe that is very straightforward. Clause 13 makes provision for all guests who appear able and willing to pay and in need and in a fit state to receive at the tourist accommodation. Because, you know, sometimes there's some people, and it's captured at clause 14, which speaks to duty not to discriminate. And it makes it an offense to discriminate against a tourist and provides the grounds for discrimination. Clause 15 sets out, and perhaps I'm not going to go through clause 14(3). The grounds are noted within the bill. It talks about race, origin, political opinion, trade union affiliation, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, social status, marital status, domestic partnership status. All those things, Mr. Speaker, are noted there that we will not make it so one does not discriminate of those who want to come into the accommodation. Clause 15 of the tourist accommodation bill stipulates that all tourist accommodation must be universally accessible for the benefit of the disabled community. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is very important because as we move to increase growth within the tourism sector, the disabled community cannot be discounted. And we feel very strongly about this, and that is why we've made provision at clause 15 within the bill, 15(1), which says that tourist accommodation which is built or renovated after the commencement of this act shall be universally accessible for the benefit of persons with disabilities in accordance with the prescribed requirements. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the disabled must also enjoy facilities at tourist accommodation. And therefore, while we've made the point that new bills after the commencement of this bill, we also recognize that those who currently do not provide universal access will have a defined period of time to do so. And we have punctuated within the act at clause 15(2), subject to section 3, an operator or owner of tourist accommodation existing prior to the commencement of this act shall make their properties universally accessible within 5 years of the commencement of this act, or shall apply to the minister for an exemption where it is not practicable to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, this Tourist Accommodation Act sends a very clear message about universal access. But it would also help not only the providers of tourist accommodation, but certainly will send the right message to the community that Barbados is very serious about how we want to treat with those who have disabilities within our tourist accommodation. Section 16, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, addresses how the tourist accommodation property must be kept. And it is important for us to maintain properties and to ensure that fixtures and furniture will always reflect the standard of the accommodation. And that is why it is necessary for us to have not only a licensing regime, but a licensing regime that incorporates inspection. Clause 17 states that an operator shall notify the tourist of any major renovations or refurbishment being undertaken at the tourist accommodation. But Mr. Speaker, this is essentially a well-known point of order as it relates to those who supply tourist accommodation. Because if you're bringing tourists, especially those who come through tour operators, you're duty bound to give notification. So this is nothing new. It is not a hindrance. All it says that where an operator contemplates major renovation or refurbishment, that they have a duty to notify those who are seeking accommodation at the establishment. Mr. Speaker, Clause 18 speaks to the protection of tourists and the public from harm by pets kept and accommodation. And Mr. Speaker, you don't want to have any tourist accommodation where you might have some pets, but the pets don't know the tourists coming in there, and then creates a problem. So what we're setting up very clearly, especially based on some reports that we have received within the product unit, I'm not going to go into detail, but when you see government inserting this clause, you must know that we've had a number of infractions relating to pets, and therefore we are mandating that notification be inserted in any tourist accommodation to provide guests from harm. Clause 19 outlines the need for the operator to ensure the safety and security of persons at the tourist accommodation. That is very straightforward. I do not believe that we need to argue this point, and we will have an argument on the floor regarding this point. And as indicated earlier, Clause 20 speaks to a multi-hazard management plan. And I will go into a little detail here, Mr. Speaker. At Clause 21, it says an operator shall ensure that there's a multi-hazard management plan for tourist accommodation. The multi-hazard management plan shall include a multi-hazard preparedness and contingency plans for various types of multi-hazards, the emergency procedures to be followed by the staff, a list of persons in each department to whom clearly identified tasks are assigned in preparation for, during, and after a multi-hazard, the duties of the staff with respect to the protection and care of tourists, and details of necessary emergency supplies. Mr. Speaker, we never want to have an incident in this country where people believe that they were not taken care of by any tourist establishment, and therefore Section 20 is of paramount importance as we execute this bill. Clause 21, very straightforward again, makes provision for operator to display emergency numbers at the establishment. And I don't believe any person will have an issue in Barbados with the fact that you have notification procedures and emergency numbers displayed within an establishment. Clause 22, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, outlines that an operator must have equipment or machinery that allows for audible communication to tourists in case of an emergency. Well, Mr. Speaker, if there's a fire, you have a fire alarm. And all we are saying, using that as an example, that you must have, of course, fire prevention, and you must have the alarm systems in place in the event, God forbid, that there is a situation of a fire within a tourist compound. And I'm using that as an example. And again, I do not believe anybody would disagree with the government, and certainly those who have worked hard to prepare this legislation, this bill, that there will be cause for concern with respect to the display of emergency numbers. Clause 22 outlines that an operator, I dealt with clause 22 already. Clause 23 instructs that the operator keeps a report of accidents and incidents involving tourists at the tourist accommodation. Mr. Speaker, some people will believe that this is onerous, but I hope not in the majority, because clearly, if anything happens on your property and you have insurance, and particularly if you have public liability insurance, it is to your benefit that you have a record of any incidents or any accidents at your property to preserve your property. We're not asking for the reports to be sent to the ministry, or we are suggesting that you have a record of the incident and that record remains at the property. Clause 24 makes provision for reporting a tourist or an employee who's suspected of having a communicable disease to the chief medical officer. And that is standard. We have inserted it, but basically, as we are well aware, and we know that the chief medical officer has full charge in this respect. Clause 25 instructs the operator to implement a complaints policy and reporting procedure received by tourists. Mr. Speaker, if I were to list some of the concerns that we receive, it would cause serious concern. But what we are asking for is that the hotels and I should say hotels, that tourists provide tourist accommodation providers, that they keep a record of complaints. Because oftentimes, you may have a complaint that comes into the ministry. We probably will have to reach out in order to validate, or there may be some cases where the report might strike at the core and at the heart of Barbados as a destination. And if you don't have the cooperation, if you don't have the report, we can't defend Barbados's good brand in the marketplace. So we are putting the onus now on those providers of tourist accommodation to ensure that they keep records of complaints made by tourists, and they actually have procedures to address these issues. Clause 26 instructs that the operator maintains matters concerning the operation of a tourist accommodation for the purposes of inspection and reporting under this bill. Of course, those records speak to name, address of and nationality of the guests, the check-in and check-out dates of the guests, a copy of the form of identification of the guests, and such other information as may be required. Mr. Speaker, when you travel and you go into Europe, they even go to the point sometimes where they scan your passport, where they ask you for a copy of your passport. All we're simply asking any operator to do is to have a form of identification of the customer to whom they are selling the accommodation. Now, this has even greater implications, Mr. Speaker, because as it relates to national security, it is always good to know who, notwithstanding you come through the checkpoint at the airport for border control, but you also have to ensure that those who are staying within your accommodation, that they are obviously known and that there's no potential threat, not only to the operation, but to the destination. So clause 26 seeks to inform those who are providing accommodation to ensure that they have the relevant records. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Part 5 speaks to inspection, warning, suspension, and revocation of a license. Now, licensing inspections are conducted to ensure that the operations of a property align with the minimum requirements as outlined within the Tourist Accommodation Bill. This section upholds industry standards. It reduces certainly the risk of exploitation, and of course, it helps to preserve the Barbados brand. But it also seeks to impose sanctions so that we can create a very strong case for those who are involved in illegal accommodation operations to be dealt with. And I am not going to delay the House in respect of this matter, but except to say that any licensing regime must have a system for warning, for suspension, and or revocation. And we believe very strongly that notwithstanding the role of the inspectors, if we have certain information that suggests that a property is perhaps, and I have to choose my words very carefully, not compliant or operating or not fit for the quality of accommodation, then the inspectors would have a duty to go in there and check. But we've gone one step further. And within clause 27, clause 27.4, we make it clear that an expert appointed under subsections 3B2 shall be received and granted access to the tourist accommodation and shall be accompanied by an inspector. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are procedures to be followed, as I indicated, before a license is issued, and one procedure is an inspection. And without prejudice to the generality of Section 27, where an application is made for a tourist accommodation license, an inspector shall inspect the tourist accommodation to which the application relates to determine whether the accommodation satisfies the prescribed minimum standards. And it goes on at 2 to say that an operator shall be given at least 7 days written notice of A, the date and time of an inspection under subsection 1, the expected duration of the inspection, and C, the number of officers who will perform the inspection. Now, Mr. Speaker, generally don't have a problem with respect to inspections, but we have to ensure, as we protect the Barbados brand, that those who are selling accommodation do so in accordance with the standard. But let me also make it very clear, Mr. Speaker, that we have gone and extended the olive branch to say that we will give you notice, that the officers will give you notice when they intend to visit your property. But do not believe for a second that you can just fob off the officers, because the officers have a job to do, and in so doing, protecting the Barbados brand. And therefore, I felt it necessary to speak to that issue, because it is an area of some concerns on some occasions. But we have made provision for the 7-day notice to be given as we continue or remit to ensure that tourist accommodation facilities in Barbados are at the required standard. Mr. Speaker, there's also at clause 29 reinspection, and of course the reports that are necessary to be completed as part of the reinspection. Warnings, Mr. Speaker, are detailed at clause 31, and the warnings essentially where an inspection of a tourist accommodation reveals a matter which was the subject of a prior request for rectification, the minister may issue a written warning to the operator requiring that the matter be rectified within a specified period. And it says so, what the warning is intended to do. It intends to indicate that the matter be rectified. It gives details of a prior written request for rectification. It explains non-compliance may result in a change of classification or the suspension or revocation of a tourist license. So we have gone the extra mile. Not to say that we are going to come in one day and revoke your permit, but we believe that you will have the subject of reinspection. After the reinspection, and you do not satisfy the criteria set out, or the request asked of you, that you'll move to a warning, Mr. Speaker. And after you've not compiled, you've not adhered, I should say, to the request, not only for the reinspection and the warning, that we can then move to a regime where you have a suspension of the license, or we could revoke. So I don't think anybody will argue with respect to the tenets of natural justice, but the ministry is not setting out a very clear framework for people to rectify problems. So it's not that the licensing and compliance department will come in one day and shut you down. Something will have to be so wrong for them to decide they're not going to issue a license. But we have built in, within this tourist accommodation bill, a series of steps and actions to be taken to ensure that those who offer tourist accommodation, that if you are not compliant, that you will have a series of steps to be followed before even the ministry would wish to consider a suspension or revocation of license. And of course, in doing so, if the view that the license should be suspended or revoked, of course, we have a right, and we've written it into Section 32, Clause 2, that the minister shall notify the operator in writing of his intention, stating the reasons for the suspension or revocation, and where the matter can be rectified, the date by which the matter must be rectified to avoid the suspension or revocation of the license. So we've settled very clearly at 32 a number of steps as it relates to the suspension, and at 31 what is meant by a warning system, and certainly at 29 reinspection, and at 30 report on the inspection. So, Mr. Speaker, we've also set up very clearly the arrangements at 33.1 for the revocation or suspension of the license. And that is very necessary because, and I made the point about the fine, that even though there is a fine, and I will repeat because the honourable member for Christchurch South is in his seat, and he's a lawyer, but I want to go back and revisit it. Sir, you were not here, so let me revisit it. Section 22.6 of the Interpretation Act, Cap 1, makes provision for a fine, penalty, or term of imprisonment to be expressed at its maximum. So within this legislation, it is expressed at its maximum. And that's not to say, so a judge effectively can decide there's no fine, no term of imprisonment, no conviction, or they may decide, okay, within the context of the contravention of the regulation, that they can assign a fine. And that is not left for us, that's left to the judiciary to exercise. So I know that when we see fines, sometimes people run and they like to hide, and sometimes we have some legal mischief being created. So I thought I would spend a few minutes to ensure that, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've taken advice that that part is fully explained to the public. Mr. Speaker, we've also made miscellaneous provisions within the Act, Part 6, and it speaks to the Register of Tourist Accommodation, and therefore we are going to ensure that all tourist accommodations are registered, and we have set out the format. It's noted at Clause 34, where we are going to set out the names and address and email addresses of the parties involved, contact information, the services offered, and so on. That is routine and is absolutely necessary for us. We've also made the provision at Clause 35 to ensure that the tourist accommodation be published every 6 months in alphabetical lists of tourist accommodation in respect of the license. So anyone who wishes to see whether or not we have registered accommodation will have the opportunity to do so. Of course, the Act speaks to the right of appeal at Clause 36, and it also speaks to confidentiality. The offenses are very well noted. At clause 38 of the bill, it speaks to an offense for persons who wish to obstruct officers from the ministry in the execution of their duties, and the attendant fine to a maximum of $100,000. It speaks to clause 39 that the minister may also make regulations for the fulfillment of the matters relating to the licensing of tourist accommodation, licensing fees, the classification of tourist accommodation, the standards, and of course, the inspections and monitoring of tourist accommodation to ensure compliance with this act. So that, Mr. Speaker, I've gone through in detail that we've gone into detail with respect to the bill. I believe I have done the Parliament its duty, and my duty in terms of explaining in detail what is before the House with respect to the bill. But, Mr. Speaker, I will not allow this opportunity to pass without perhaps also giving the country a quick update on the tourism sector. And I'll be very quick, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of policy matters that we engage at the ministry, and in our attempt to ensure that we build out the tourism sector. I would have mentioned in here before that we have a visitor spend task force, we have a tourism advisory council, we have a cruise advisory council, we now have a sports tourism policy approved by the cabinet, we have a young luxury traveler policy approved by the cabinet as well, an attractions policy that will see the build-out of additional attractions in the country. We have an airlift strategy, Mr. Speaker, that we discuss and we've spoken about time and time again. But we're also going the route of having a public opinion survey to ensure that to get Barbadians' views in respect to the tourism sector. And we also have the timeshare and fractional ownership bill that will soon be introduced into this Parliament. But, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the airlift strategy, we've done well with phase 1 of this airlift strategy. We focus on increasing the number of air seats coming into Barbados. We've brought more than additional 70,000 seats to destination Barbados from the United States. We are maintaining lift, of course, out of the United Kingdom. Specifically, I would have spoken about the lift from Delta coming out of Atlanta, American coming out of the daily services, obviously, albeit with September and October being suspended as they normally do. The American Airlines Philadelphia service as well. Let me once again thank, for the record, the Permanent Secretary who's traveled with me along with the North American Director, Mr. Peter Mears, and the Canadian Director, Mr. UC Ski, who have played a significant role in helping us to expand our airlift. Of course, phase 2 of the airlift strategy will be executed. The focus is on new airlift coming out of key gateways within the United States of America, aligning with international traffic behind those gateways into Barbados. Of course, it is our duty to protect airlift in a very uncertain world, and we will continue to do so. With respect to some airline updates, I have the honor of informing the House, as the House may know, that KLM will resume service out of Schiphol on October 25th. Again, the focus being on driving additional European traffic. I have been advised that Copa Airlines will increase its service to Barbados. They will introduce the 5th flight, or the 5th service as we refer to it, in January of 2026. I'm advised it has already been loaded within the airline's database system for all to see. I would also let the House know that Air Canada in the month of November will have a double daily on Friday and Saturdays, again driving additional traffic from that market, but only for the month of November. JetBlue will also add a twice daily service out of Boston on Saturdays. That is very good news coming out of the northeastern corridor as we continue to build our service. Of course, BA, Virgin, and Condor, and the others. Let me also inform the House that we are pursuing new markets, Africa and the Gulf states. We have a director who has been appointed, the supporting staff. I'm sure that they will soon be confirmed, and that we're moving to ensure that the director responsible for Africa and the Gulf states be stationed in our Kenyan consulate. I'm also pleased to inform the House and the public at large that we are also, and I've directed the board of the BTMI to ensure that the Asia Pacific director is appointed, because we have to ensure that we have growth from new and emerging markets. And therefore, if we're going to have growth from these markets, we must have the personnel appointed who are competent and capable of ensuring that we grow these markets. Of course, this is part of our expansion strategy. If we want to grow tourism in Barbados, we can't only rely on what we've always had. We cannot only rely on growth within key markets. We now have to look to other markets if we're going to drive growth and of course increase spend. So I am pleased, therefore, that the BTMI will be moving with alacrity. They know my position very clearly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I don't mix my words. We've made it clear that we have to have the officers in place to execute the growth agenda of the ministry. It is not a secret that we expect to have more hotel rooms by 2029. We will have an increase of some 1,600 new rooms to the hotel inventory, and of very luxurious standard, I may add. That is good for the destination, and as a result of the growth that we're anticipating, of course, it will also help and contribute to airlift. More growth in the tourism sector, Mr. Speaker, means more employment opportunities for Barbadians. It means more foreign exchange for the country. It means, Mr. Speaker, more airlift, Deputy Speaker. It means more airlift for the destination. So we are very excited about the opportunities for even more economic activity in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, with respect to cruise, I have directed the BTMI to develop a 5-year cruise strategy. I should shortly be taking that to the cabinet for its consideration, but opportunities for us to ensure that we not only ring fence the cruise sector, because there are some obviously issues that are emerging within that sector, and we have to ensure that we position ourselves to take maximum benefit from the cruise lines that visit Barbados. Of course, as I indicated when I was in Hamburg last week, that we're expecting over 22% growth in cruise passengers this coming winter season, building on last winter season. We also expect to have more than 400 cruise calls, up from the 389 that we had last year, and that shows remarkable progress. Of course, we are doing what we can do. Summer remains for cruise in this region, particularly the Southern Caribbean, still a major challenge. We are working to ensure that we deal with the challenges and that we can incentivize and get more cruise ships here in the summer. It is a tall order, but that we're up to it and that we will ensure that we do what we have to do. We're going to continue our training with respect to the taxi operators. We're also encouraging the taxi operators. We started with the Bridgetown Port, not only to respect our product training, but also ensuring that they can have mobile credit card access. It is no secret that a lot of people in visitors globally do not travel with a lot of cash, and therefore we don't want to miss out on the opportunities for extra spend in Barbados by persons who prefer to use a credit card, either plastic or via the phone. So we are, of course, having discussions, and we are talking with a leading financial institution. They've met with them, and we are going to continue our persuasion to ensure that they can certainly benefit from increased earnings. Of course, we have a very clear strategy plan. We are going to have a very defined strategy with respect to events in Barbados. Of course, the public is aware, and certainly members of this August chamber, that we will have SOTIC, the State of the Tourism Industry Conference in Barbados, commencing September 30th. that's another opportunity for us not only to showcase Barbados, but also an opportunity for us to drive additional business to Barbados. It's not only for persons from within the region. We have a number of persons who will be coming internationally to Barbados. The BTMI would have also hosted Connect 2025. It was the first one since the COVID pandemic. We had a number of tour operators and other airline partners in Barbados who came for that event. And we're doing all these things, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to ensure we build out additional growth and capacity within the sector. Of course, CARIFESTA 15 was an excellent celebration. We're going to build on that legacy. We're going to use everything, all our resources, to ensure that we can project the legacy and develop tourism as tourism activities to ensure that we build on that wonderful support. We are continuing to maintain support to the intimate hotels of Barbados, and we're giving additional support in respect of revenue management. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to delay the chamber any longer, except to say that as we prepare for the next or the forthcoming winter season, we will have a pre-season meeting with all the stakeholders in tourism as we prepare for the sector. It is necessary that you do so because you don't want to have surprises. So all of the persons who are necessary, we will ensure that we have that meeting and to ensure that we are all going in the same direction as we continue to build up tourism. So that, Mr. Speaker, I don't think there's much more that I will wish to do except to thank the officers within the ministry. We have the officers who are here in the public gallery. As I wrap up, I will call their names. But they have done a tremendous amount of work in getting the bill to where it is. They have also had to endure my speed in terms of getting things done in order to ensure that we build up Barbados. The country depends very heavily on tourism, and as a result of those persons who work within the tourism sector who help us to deliver, and certainly those persons at the policy level within the ministry who help us to accomplish our objectives. It is not easy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because everybody is looking for a piece of the tourism pie globally. It is not easy, Mr. Speaker, because we live in a world of uncertainty as it relates even to airlift into a destination. We are well aware, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of the challenges associated with engines of aircraft. We are well aware of the delays that the aircraft manufacturing entities are having. And therefore, we feel very happy that notwithstanding all of these challenges, that this little Barbados can ensure that we not only increase our tourism spend, because you know sometimes you can play the numbers game. You can look at arrivals. I have been trained to look at numbers. And I'm not an accountant, but I'm trained to look at numbers. And I like to see the spend, Mr. Speaker, because the spend tells the story of the destination. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point that this bill is highly desirable, long overdue. It also, like I indicated, corrects some deficits that are necessary within the country. It is also an opportunity for us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to once again settle where we are, where we are going, and as a result of this, I am very pleased that I have the honor to stand here in this August chamber and to lead the tourist accommodation bill, recognizing the tremendous contributions by those who work on this bill within the ministry, and of course the staff at the CPC. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be read a second time.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg the suspension of the Honourable Chamber. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the chamber for 10 minutes until 10 minutes past 11. 12.
I beg that this House be suspended for 10 minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This house is now suspended for 10 minutes.